After weeks of stalled negotiations, public frustration, and escalating political blame, the United States appears to be moving toward an end to its historic government shutdown. The deal, now advancing through Congress, does more than restore funding. It exposes the sharp power struggle in Washington, where budget decisions have become weapons in a broader fight over control, ideology, and the direction of national policy. As we delve into the details today, this and more will be explored in our flash news. Good afternoon and welcome. I am Tabitha Akro. Let's begin. The United States Senate on Monday approved a compromise bill to end the longest government shutdown in American history, clearing the first major hurdle in restoring federal operations after weeks of disruption. The measure passed 60-40 with support from most Republicans and 8 Democrats. It would reopen federal agencies whose funding expired on October 1st and pause President Donald Trump's plan to reduce the federal workforce, preventing any layoffs until January 30th. The bill now heads to the Republican-controlled House of Representatives. Speaker Mike Johnson has signaled he aims to bring it to a vote as early as Wednesday, after which it would go to President Donald Trump for his signature. Trump has described the deal as very good. Let's take a look.
Well, it depends what deal we're talking about, but if it's a deal I heard about, that's certainly, they want to change the deal a little bit, but I would say so. I think based on everything I'm hearing, they haven't changed anything, and we have support from enough Democrats, and we're going to be opening up our country. It's too bad it was closed, but we'll be opening up our country.
The shutdown has delayed food benefits for millions of low-income households, caused hundreds of thousands of federal employees to miss paychecks, and also led to flight delays due to reduced air traffic staffing. Democrats expressed frustration that the agreement does not guarantee the continuation of federal health insurance subsidies set to expire at the end of the year. These subsidies benefit about 24 million Americans. The bill schedules a separate vote on the subsidies in December, but offers no assurances that the Republican-led chambers will approve them. Meanwhile, the temporary funding measure would keep government spending in place through January 30th and maintain the current pace of federal borrowing, which is expected to add roughly $1.8 trillion to the national debt this year. The deal also provides funding for the federal SNAP food assistance program through September 30th, reducing the risks of benefit interruptions if lawmakers clash over spending again later in the year. A recent report by Reuters Ipsos poll found that half of Americans blamed Republicans for the shutdown, while 43% blamed Democrats. So if this blame moves from the Republicans to Democrats, who then takes the blame? U.S. stocks rose on Monday following signs of progress toward reopening government services. That's all for the United States shutdown. And taking you to Syria. Just recently, the United States President Donald Trump pledged to support Syria's political and economic transition on Monday after holding landmark talks at the White House with Syrian President Ahmed al-Sharaa, a former al-Qaeda commander who until recently had been sanctioned by Washington as a foreign terrorist. Let's take a look.
He comes from a very tough place, and he's a tough guy. I liked him. I get along with him, the new president of Syria. And we'll do everything we can to make Syria successful, because that's part of the Middle East.
The visit marked the first by a Syrian head of state to Washington and capped a year of dramatic change in Syria. Shara, 43, seized power in December last year when his Islamist-led forces overthrew longtime leader Bashar al-Assad. Since then, he has embarked on a sweeping diplomatic campaign aimed at ending Syria's isolation and repositioning the country away from Assad's former backers, Iran and Russia, and closer to Turkey, the Gulf, and the United States. Shara's key objective in Washington was the lifting of the Caesar Sanctions Act, which has obstructed large-scale foreign investment in reconstruction. During the closed-door meeting, the United States Treasury Department announced a 180-day extension of its suspension of enforcement of the sanctions, though a full repeal can only be authorized by Congress. Security cooperation was a central focus at the meeting. The United States has been brokering talks on a possible security arrangement between Syria and Israel amid lingering concerns over Shara's militant past. Last week, sources told the media that the U.S. is preparing to establish a military presence at Damascus Air Base as part of a new security framework. Syria recently signed a political cooperation declaration with the U.S.-led global coalition to defeat Islamic State. Hours before Monday's meeting, Syrian officials said authorities had foiled two Islamic State plots to assassinate Shara in recent months and had launched a nationwide operation that resulted in the arrest of more than 70 suspects. Now we see that Shara's arrival at the White House was notably restrained. Unlike other days, he entered through a side entrance instead of the usual ceremonial driveway that typically displays national flags for visiting heads of state. After the meeting, he briefly stepped out of his motorcade to greet several hundred supporters waving Syrian flags outside the White House. Now, let's take a look at that and let's get to see his entrance. White House. Congress remains divided on the future of sanctions. Several influential lawmakers have advocated lifting the Caesar Act to enable reconstruction, with the World Bank estimating Syria will require more than $200 billion to rebuild. However, some Republican lawmakers argue that isn't sanctions risks legitimizing past abuses and instability. We'll see that Syria remains deeply fragile. Recent sectarian violence has killed more than 2,500 people since Assad's fall, raising questions about whether Shara's government can govern inclusively and stabilize the country. Trump's renewed focus on Syria comes as his administration works to maintain a U.S.-brokered ceasefire in Gaza and advance a broader Middle East diplomatic strategy. Shara's rise has been one of the most dramatic reversals in recent regional history. Once known as Abu Muhammad al-Golani, he joined al-Qaeda in Iraq after the 2003 U.S.-led invasion and was imprisoned by the U.S. forces before returning to Syria to lead insurgency. The United States designated him a global terrorist in 2013. He formally severed ties with al-Qaeda in 2016 and gradually consolidated power in Syria's northwest before toppling Assad. The United States removed the bounty on him in December, and the UN Security Council lifted terrorism sanctions on him and his interior minister last week. That's a good move for Shara right there. But then a disheartening and disturbing situation is happening in Africa, in Sudan. Sudan, there's been an intensifying violence in Sudan following the fall of Fasher, which has triggered a new wave of displacement, with humanitarian agencies warning that the crisis is deepening across the country. Recent footage aired by Saudi state television showed extensive damage in El Fasher, including bullet-scarred buildings and mosques inside a military medical complex. The site sits near the Sudanese Army's former 6th Division headquarters, where heavy fighting took place between the Rapid Support Forces and the Sudanese Armed Forces. Markings in the video also indicated the presence of landmines in the area. Let's take a look. Rapid Support Forces seized El Fasher in late October after months of fighting, a turning point that has reshaped control dynamics in Darfur and central Sudan. The group has accused the army of using civilian and medical facilities for military operations, a claim the army has not publicly addressed. Meanwhile, displacement is rising rapidly in Sudan. The International Organization for Migration reports that around 2,000 people fled several towns and villages in North Kordofan between Friday and Sunday due to the clashes. Kordofan has emerged alongside Darfur as another major front in the conflict. Aid groups also say the capture of El Fasher has left hundreds dead and forced tens of thousands to escape to overcrowded camps. Many of the displaced report killings, looting, and other abuses as they fled. The IOM estimates that nearly 92,000 people have left El Fasher and surrounding communities in recent weeks, adding to the millions already uprooted since the conflict began in 2023. Humanitarian agencies warn that without sustained access and protection for civilians, both displacement and civilian casualties are likely to worsen. The situation happening right there in Sudan is quite disheartening, and it's sad to see that for several years, this conflict is still ongoing in Sudan and lives are being lost. Women are going through a lot of trauma and even men. But then that's a lot for the international community to definitely get into it and ensure this conflict is being resolved. Now, moving over to Japan and the rising tensions in Asia, Japan's new Prime Minister, Sani Takaichi, has reaffirmed that Tokyo could support the United States in the event of a Chinese military move against Taiwan, outlining a scenario in which Japan may exercise collective self-defense. Takaichi, who took office last month, stated that her remarks reflect Japan's long-standing security policy. Her position places Taiwan's security more directly within Japan's strategic interests than previous administrations, marking a notable shift in tone. Meanwhile, China regards Taiwan as part of its territory and has increased military activity around the island, including regular flights and naval maneuvers. A large-scale attack on Taiwan could disrupt global trade routes and alter the balance of power in East Asia, where Japan is a key U.S. ally and relies heavily on secure sea lanes. Japan hosts the largest concentration of U.S. forces outside the United States, and analysts believe these bases would be early targets in any regional conflict. Under Japan's mutual defense treaty with Washington, Tokyo is obligated to defend U.S. forces on its soil. Constitutional constraints historically limited Japan's ability to use force overseas, but a 2015 reinterpretation opened the door for collective self-defense under specific conditions. We see that Takaichi has warned that a blockade or other major Chinese escalation around Taiwan could create what Japan defines as an existential crisis, potentially justifying military support for U.S. operations, as we see. Now, evacuating Japanese nationals would remain a priority, she said, while noting the need to prepare for worst-case scenarios. So how China took this remark? The remarks have drawn criticism from opposition lawmakers who urged the prime minister to retract them. Chinese officials also issued strong objections, insisting that Taiwan is an internal matter and cautioning Japan against deepening involvement. Now, Chinese official made a statement around Takaichi's remarks. Let's take a listen.
日本领导人日前在国会公然发表涉台错误言论，暗示武力介入台海可能性。 粗暴干涉中国内政，严重违背一个中国原则、中日四个政治文件精神和国际关系基本准则，同日本政府迄今所做的政治承诺严重不符，性质和影响极其恶劣。中方对此强烈不满，坚决反对，已向日。
According to China's official, China strongly opposes Takaichi's remarks. So U.S. defense assessment suggests that China aims to have the capability to seize Taiwan by 2027, though there is no clear indication of when or whether Beijing intends to act. Takaichi now faces the challenge of maintaining Japan's economic ties with China while reinforcing security cooperation with the United States. This is what is happening right there. The coming days will definitely bring you up to speed with the updates. Until next time, this is where we'll be drawing the curtain on today's Flash News. Remember, we'll bring you untold stories and Undaunted at the top of the hour, 8 p.m. Until then, do have a pleasant day and stay safe.